Well, it's Friday, January 29th. So happy to be on live with you guys. If you're listening in, we're going to have folks coming in soon. I'm sure you are now on with Roz McCarthy and Can I Talk with Roz. Listen, guys, my co-host is missing in action, so you got to bear with me for a little bit. But we got a strong guest today that's going to be able to share a lot with you guys. Let me tell you what's going on just in regards to like in the circle of Can I Talk with Roz in my world. And right now, the things that I'm focused on, we have a lot of conversation going on about social equity in several different states. The state of Arizona has an adult use bill. The state of New Jersey is an adult use state now. And so they're talking about social equity. The state of New York. So I've been working a lot on just policy writing. How do we make sure we're defining it correctly? What do we need to do to make sure that our execution and enforcement of a social equity program is facilitated? And, so it's a lot of busy work that's going on top of looking at ways that we can, as an organization and running M4MM, be more efficient, support our members more. So if you're a member of M4MM, I want to encourage you guys. Next week, we have a big announcement, a big reveal. We're going to be bringing you more things to support you, to make sure that we are making things easy for information, for you to get information. So just get ready for that. So I see folks are coming in. Happy Friday, everybody. Eric Range is going to be coming in a little bit late. But we're going to get started. So one of the things I want to talk to you guys about is the fact that I met this young lady in Clubhouse. And if you're not in Clubhouse, ping me. I will give you a Clubhouse invitation. Because if you have an iPhone, you need to be in Clubhouse. It really is a new platform that allows for conversation and meeting people about a range of different subjects. But I talk to people in the cannabis industry, and I'm meeting folks that are really just inspire me and that I never would have met outside of Clubhouse. And they are talking, they're teaching, they're encouraging, they're supporting, they're giving these nuggets of information that you wouldn't find anywhere else. And this young lady I met on Clubhouse, and she just impressed me. And not only from knowing her business, knowing this industry, but also just her spirit and the positivity and the ability to want to make sure that we're making a change and making a difference for our community. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Hiwa. Hiwa, how are you, my love?
I'm good, Roz. Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely.
I'm doing amazing. I'm in Atlanta, so even though we're open, I still pretty much stay home, but I do get to see the sunlight every now and again, so I'm grateful. But Clubhouse has been great for being able to, like, what you're saying is so true. I mean, people just want to be able to have conversation again, I think. And a lot of people have Zoom fatigue too, right?
Yes. Well, I tell people, you'll be surprised you get on there. Hey, Eric Range is coming in. So listen, you'll be surprised you get on. What's up, Brother Range?
What's going on? How y'all doing?
Hey, I made the introduction, and so this will be great. So Eric Range is our board chair with Minorities for Medical Marijuana. He's my co-host. He's my ace, my brother. I love him so much. And, so he's going to be talking with you as well. But introduce yourself to everybody who they don't know you, have never heard of you before, don't know exactly what you do, where you're located. Please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Haze AlFayed. I am originally from New York City, so Dykeman, which is like Washington Heights, right above Harlem, for anybody that is. And I have had the pleasure of being raised very internationally. I've been back and forth between the continent of Africa, where my father's from, and to Canada, where I was educated. I went to school in Toronto. I also I went to Carolina A&T, early 2000s. So I was down in Carolina, and now I'm in Atlanta. Loving Atlanta. My sister's been down here for about 15 years, and being in the cannabis space, I think it's always interesting. People, well, why are you in Atlanta? Atlanta of all places. And I always say, as an economist, which is my area of specialization, and as a now cannabis economist, coming from prior to that, I was absolutely working more in the entertainment, sports realm, and kind of looking at technology trends and things of that nature, and making that shift into cannabis. Atlanta makes a lot of sense. This is the epicenter of Black excellence. And when I say I'm in driving distance of all of the best HBCUs, my niece is a sophomore at Spelman. So I mean, we just very proud of all of the things that are kind of happening in this region. And then also when you look at the agricultural legacy that we have in the Carolinas, and Georgia, and Alabama, and I mean all through kind of this region, I think it's a powerful testament to the opportunity for reformation.
Yeah.
We are trying to see much more restorative justice through a tangible impact lens, and I think that as an as someone who decided to study economics, the major motivation for that was my father's affinity for Malcolm X and what he believed as far as economics education and his affiliation with Nation of Islam for a brief time in my life. And that always continued in those relationships there. We really understood that we have to have tangible action items, and we have to be very clear and understand, how are we going to shifts and these changes, because we're trying to catch up in a race where our Caucasian counterparts are 8 times ahead of our median incomes for the most part,
Yeah.
when you kind of look at the facts and figures across the board. And then when we look at the diversity statistics within cannabis, I mean, we all know that they're abysmal, but we have to ask ourselves and question, well, why is this happening? And a lot of it is because people will hire those that they know that's in their sphere of influence. And so when the people that got into this game, you know, most of them did not look like us, and a lot of them didn't come from a lot of the communities that we came from. So who are they hiring? There's
Yeah.
the legacy market. There's not a traditional resume that you can look at with 20 years experience, right? So, you got to think about, well, who are people that we know? This person is intelligent, they have relationships. And so that's kind of how a lot of the staffing happened in the early part of the industry. Why I see that as not only a challenge that we have to kind of navigate now, more than anything, is that we are not always seeing people in positions based on merit and work ethic. It's very much nepotism that has kind of taken root in this industry. And while I'm all for supporting those that on an intimate and personal level, and who can do the job and do the job well, at the same time, we also saw in the political landscape the dangers of nepotism when it is unchecked and out of control. So for what we are working on with Cannabis in Color and Cannanomics in Color, which is the U.S. branch of our Canadian division, is really understanding the workforce action plans and the forecasting that we're doing, so that we can
Right.
work with our partnerships within HBCUs to say these are jobs and these are the careers and these are the need, right? At all of these levels, not just entry level. We're talking at the executive level, we're talking leadership levels. What is really the need? How are we interfacing with these companies? How are we looking at the different markets and what's going on? And how are we taking that data and that information to then forecast and put together these workforce action plans that can be in alignment with higher education institutions, so that they
Sure.
recognize, okay, these are the skills that need to be rolled out, or these are the programs that we need to put together, or what do social equity programs that are being written into compliance need to look like as it pertains to workforce readiness and preparedness.
Yeah.
And so the data is critical, but it's also a long game. And I think that that's been my kind of the story even in my career, is like, I started out, I grew up in New York, and then I left to go to Carolina. My first husband was in the military, he was in the Marine Corps. So my first kind of engagement with the plant had a lot to do with, seeing PTSD and different medical situations that were coming up. And, plant-based medicine, my father's East African. So that's always been a major component of what we really feel has to happen, is this return to plant medicine and wellness and healing, right?
Yeah.
And so going through that and then ending up in Toronto right around the time, I went to the University of Western Ontario for economics and computer science. And then, that was about the time they were legalizing, federally across the country. And when I returned to New York, I knew I wanted to come back to the US. I knew that, my family was here. It was a big thing for me. And it got very personal. I had an uncle who passed. We had a very traumatic incident in late September 2018, but he had struggled through the cannabis sector in the legacy market, and had faced quite a bit of issues around that. And when he passed, it was almost like everything just kind of opened up and aligned, and understanding how did my background as an economist be able to merge with cannabis and what needed to happen. And I really feel like there was a guidance that happened there. And I moved to Atlanta to be closer to my sister. and for us to support each other through that. And that was the best decision that I ever made. And then when COVID kicked off, we'd already been doing a lot of remote workforce optimization anyway. I had my team, half of my team was in Toronto. We also had people in Ghana and Nigeria that we were interfacing with, and in the UK. So we'd kind of already gotten into this Zoom workforce thing vibe,
you touched
and
on
that
a
was
lot.
it.
So I want your background is just it's fascinating. Sitting here listening to you, one of the first things you said that really stuck out to me, and as you went through telling your story, I can see it completely woven in there. Is that that education, that foundation you received at North Carolina A&T? You know what I mean? That I remember as a young professional. I used to work with the Upward Bound program, and we used to take kids on college tours. I will never forget the day I set foot on North Carolina A&T's campus. There is an aura there
Aggie pride.
that a part of our history as a people. I'm telling y'all, the Greensboro Four, which a lot of people don't know, really set off the sit-in movements of the civil rights time, and they were students at North Carolina A&T when they started that. So I hear that woven into your story. You also touched on something that I think is so super important. When we talk about social equity in this industry, it's always been about licensing and let's get more licenses, and I get that, that's vital. But I think you really touch on, I think, the most important part that we are kind of overlooking, and that's that workforce development. How do we make sure we're getting college students ready? How do we make sure we're getting, professionals who have, tons of experience into this space, and making sure that we're not just having Black and brown owned businesses, but that the entire industry is actually diverse and so on. So you were touching on a little bit about, what your team was working on during the COVID-19, when everything kind of hit, which also coincides with the George Floyd and everything that was going on. So talk a little bit, and Roz, I don't know if you, I kind of came in late, so I don't know if you had another line of questions.
We got it.
Yeah, I mean, just talk about, I guess, some of the work you guys were doing, what you guys saw in terms of responses from people during all of this COVID-19, George Floyd, a presidential election. Like, there was a lot that was going on. So what was that like?
It was a lot. I will say this. I moved to Atlanta, and very quickly COVID happened. So all of the networking, all of the relationship building and everything that I had kind of planned to do when I came down here, it changed. But thankfully, I'm very technologically savvy, and then I have a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old who also get me together whenever I am not. So we were definitely able to kind of leverage that. And it was an emotional year for a lot of people. And when we had originally started with Cannabis in Color, we looked at it as this is an opportunity for us to create a professional development platform, the Coursera model and things of that nature, because we really wanted to get people prepared and get them connected to real tangible information. As we've seen over the last year, misinformation is probably the most detrimental thing to our community. When, we look historically, it went from not allowing us to have information education to now giving us so much that our kids are trying to see what's truth, what's fact, how do you practice discernment, and seeing what's going on in the market, and seeing that there was almost like this rush of competition of trying to find a solution that was really more rooted in driving revenue for startups and technology startups. I realized that, yeah, there's an opportunity there. You can help people, but we're really not doing the forecasting. If we're not doing the forecasting, and we don't know what courses, and we don't know what education, and we don't know what understanding there needs to be, then who are we really supporting, right? And then as I saw this, so what really shifted for me was when things happened with Floyd, and I saw the change. It was a huge shift for me, even just because with my mother, especially my mother's white. She's originally from Wilmington, North Carolina, and her response to it was something that really mended our relationship, and it was a bittersweet moment because there was immersive empathy that happened in that Floyd situation. And I was able to really start healing across communities, because growing up with my father, you deal with all these identities identity issues. I think, we talk about frequently through these, these traumas that really what they are, because, things that we've experienced and things that we've picked up that don't serve us. And when you shift through that and we start building these cross-cultural relationships and bridges, and we really start to see people with that level of immersive empathy, and we start to take responsibility for our own healing, innovation starts to really kick off, right? And when that happened, it was something that for me, the optics of what these companies were doing, I mean, it was almost like a commoditization of our pain, right? And it was all of these hashtags, and it was all of these like, yes, we're committed, shop and Black owned and all, and
never saw any follow-up, and no follow-up.
LinkedIn statements, blacked out IG pages,
Yes.
All
and
of
that
it
was the depth of it, right?
all of it. And during that time, we'd been working on a DEI solution specifically for the cannabis sector predominantly. And I was having a lot of conversations with my mother. I was having a lot of conversations with her friends. And because you have to try to understand the other side, right? Like, what are the blockages? Like, why is there such a disconnect, right? I mean, and a lot of times emotionally, we feel like this is malicious. This is, and you look at systemic racism and you look at this, and sometimes it is that. And sometimes it is just ignorance that is just not even known or understood. And a lot of times we don't think about, well, my friends that listen to rock music aren't necessarily going to know the reggae artists or the artists I listen to in the UK. Maybe my friends aren't going to know about, right, if they're here in the US, right? And so when we don't have those bridges that are being built, then we don't have access to the information, and we don't have understanding, and we can't teach properly, right? And when you're not part of the dominant culture, we see the silencing that happens. One of the biggest concerns that I had was so many Black women came out talking about, and I mean, this has been had frequently in personal circles, but, I've worked for this manager, and she took all the credit for my work, and, and she kind of scaled up through the company, and I was working so hard and just trying to be noticed and just trying to play my part. And there was a tweet that went viral, and it was really heartbreaking when you went through a lot of those experiences, because so many times we are faced with merit that is not being noticed because they only notice when you make a mistake, right? And then if you're not communicating with your higher ups, if there's a disconnect in that chain, then they don't know that you exist, and they don't know the work that you're doing, and you don't know the conversations that are being had. So the push to me was transparency. How do we take data? How do we really sit with these companies and hold them accountable and say, we need forecasting, right? We need you to tell us what are the jobs, so that all of these people that you say that you don't know, well, we don't know where to find high-level Black talent, and we don't know, and all of these, but we didn't even know this existed. So all of those kind of things that I heard over the last year, that now, well, if we have workforce action plans, and we have partnerships and relationships with HBCUs, especially, or we have partnerships and relationships, like when I was in school in Toronto, my partner and I connected through Black Student Association. She was president of Black Student Association. So when I was in Toronto, like that's her and I, she's first generation Jamaican from Toronto. I mean, she's a medical research doctor. She really propelled and drove entry points for me into understanding this industry. And we connect through that way. So if we create these workforce pipelines, then there's no excuses anymore, because now we're having conversations across the aisle. And now we're saying, well, what are the merit points you need? Because I can teach skills all day, but utilizing psychometrics, utilizing data, utilizing character references, looking at innovating that, like, it's like, give somebody a small project, see how they execute. Sometimes we want to come all the way up here and we say, okay, we're going to fix all these huge, insane problems that even our ancestors had difficulty reconciling with, and all these years of infinite wisdom around the community, and we still haven't been able to solve it. So why don't we just kind of dial in on where are our strengths? What do we bring to the table? And that's what true diversity is to me. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is about diversity of thought. And when about us not being a monolith, we have to push to understand that the Black community is not just one thing, and that the experiences of African Americans differ to those of us that are continental Africans, and those of us that come from Caribbean backgrounds, those of us that are multiracial. But that's the beauty of it. And then if we're able to cross the table and cross the aisle.
Then let me stop you right there, because I want you to take a breath, because I want to laugh and look at Eric, because he always, what you just said, who always says that he always goes, diversity is diversity of thought, and it's coming from different backgrounds, and he'll name off all the, from the continent of Africa, from the Caribbean. So this again is,
that's because I'm married to a Jamaican, and I know firsthand, and I'm a Black American. Listen, there are huge divides in between our two cultures that we had to overcome, and most people don't recognize that. So yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, even a good friend of mine, and shout out to Veronica Valdez and Enterprise Florida. She did a program Wednesday on Zoom for the Haitian American businesses. Girl, and it's just about opportunities and access to capital. They had 175 people on at 7:00 at night, serious about how to create opportunity. And so again, we are having to have these serious conversations. And I just want to segue into this because I'm looking at your website. I'm looking at Cannanomics for the Culture. I want you guys to make sure you got the website. Go to it right now. Check it out. Be able to, because I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of how did you and your co-founders start this. Just the first paragraph alone, and indulge me. Building a cannabis economy with data you can trust. Do you guys understand how important data is going to be in regards to this industry for years and years to come? And being able to have data that not only our community can trust, but also the industry can trust. In our community, sometimes we don't trust the data because we don't feel like you're coming in asking for our viewpoint, asking for our feedback, that you're counting our numbers. So the fact that you, in your beautiful mind as an economist, was like, let me get ahead of the curve. Just walk us through that process of creating a business. And if you guys want to know about ancillary business, this is an ancillary business. How'd you guys come up with this concept, and how'd you look at it to monetize it as well? Not only doing good things about collecting data, but knowing that there's revenue there to be gained.
So my co-founder, Aika Washington, who was at Western with me, and when I tell you, she's one of the most phenomenal minds, and really has inspired me in so many ways, because she's, you have to remember, I'm 38. So when I returned to school, I'm in school with 20-year-olds and, these young minds, and, and I've got kids and all of this and art. So that intergenerational thing was interesting. But I was in a medical program. She was focused on going to medical school. And she was really passionate, and because I have symptomatic sickle cell trait. She was actively involved in the sickle cell community, did a lot of stuff there. And so we worked together and just built a genuine relationship and a genuine friendship. And she had the medical mind and the understanding of cannabis that I did not have. She understood the science. She understood the industry. She understood what needed to happen. She also had a cultural relationship, being Jamaican, and understanding the importance there. She's introduced me and connected me to so many incredible people. And when we were sitting down really trying to, what are we going to do? What do we need? What does the industry need? And she would call me, because she was working for one of the larger cannabis consulting firms in the UK when she was doing her master's out there. She did do her dissertation surrounding cannabis for pain management in the African diaspora and kind of assessing that. But as she was there and her presence, and she's going to these conferences that we would never be able to afford, because, the ticket price is like $600-700. And, I mean, it's like all of this, she's, going because a company's sending her, and she's like pretty much one of 5 Black people that are at such conferences, at the time. And like, she would just call me. Right. So, and so she would just call me, and she would just be like, I don't know what we're going to do, but we got to do something, because the thing is that the trends that were going on in Canada is happening in the UK and is happening in the US. So, I mean, there's, in Australia, in all of these different, markets where, I mean, we exist, we're there, but we're not in the room. And so that was where we started really, okay, as an economist, my mind starts working. And of course, because I have a background in computer science, so I'm able to build and code out all of my platforms. I do all of the graphic design and everything, I mean, it was just always something that I was able to put together. And, we know how to bootstrap. Y'all know we know how to bootstrap. If there's anybody, any community that I have seen do more with nothing, right? Look, and so conceptually, we worked through it. We thought about it. We really thought about the way that we were going to approach it. We started a few different, conversational groups. So on GroupMe, we were doing a couple of webinar things. We were just kind of really understanding people and really trying to get to know the B2C component. when I say B2C, I mean the potential employees, the young people that are hungry, they're passionate. I started, really having a lot of meetings with students that were going to school for all kinds of different disciplines, like seeing what the intersectionality could be within their particular discipline within this sector. And so we kind of went through it and we started seeing that there was more and more of these like apps and websites and Coursera, and everybody's got a class, everybody's got a course. And as committed as we are to rolling out those courses and working with partners to develop out courses that are accessible and digestible to communities of color, at the same time, we recognize that, well, we don't want to crowd a market with and compete against people that have capital that we could allow them having access to, right?
Sure.
And that was just a reality check, and it was a let's pivot, right? We know our stuff. Let's pivot. Let's figure it out, because that's what everybody's been doing through COVID. Figure it out. Pivot. Be resilient. And sitting back and looking at what the need was, and coming off of a lot of these conferences and being pulled in to different rooms of conversations, this to me was the need, right?
Yeah.
Because now I'm able to really focus on my impact mission, which is bringing in economists from HBCUs across the country that are interested in doing economics through the lens of the cannabis sector, that are interested in connecting the agricultural legacy. Because if you look at Durham, right, North Carolina, you want to talk about agricultural legacies that are going on, and even across the South. I mean, there's so much birthright. And I'm a huge advocate for saying that there needs to be pathways for African Americans that are descendants of that transatlantic slave trade that happened here within the US, that are particular programs for African Americans who are connected to that legacy. Because as continental Africans, even though we have shared experiences, I'm a strong advocate that there needs to be programs that are in place to help restorative justice for a lot of those families that lost their land just through not having the education. We go down to Metter, Georgia, we interface with Black farmers down there and just sit at the feet of our elders and really listen to these stories, right? And merging those two things, impact, education, but then agriculture teaches you something. Like I just said to a friend of mine the other day, everything that you needed to know about life, you learned from growing cannabis. Wait, plant seeds, be patient. If you don't tend to it, it's going to die. And sometimes, if you let the wrong gender come around, it distract you and ruin your crop too, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
So,
mess up, start all over again.
Hold on now.
But what I will say is,
she dropped a little innuendo in there. I see that.
Hey, but listen, it's the mess up, start over again. I mean, and truly, it's a great analogy. If you've ever been a cultivator, you have the patience that you have to, to have in order to. It's about perfecting this process, and then you're not going to get it perfect, but you're always striving for. And it's really how we live our life. We're striving for perfection. We're trying to get it right. We're trying to figure it out, and we're trying to leave a legacy for our families and for the people that we love the most, or what have you. So I get it. I think your story about how you're interfacing with Black farmers in the rural regions of Georgia, and hearing and knowing that they deserve an opportunity in this industry is so impactful, and it's just so key and dead on. And being able to take an economic slant to your messaging and pull the HBCUs and those individuals that have some of that research and some of that experience to kind of pony up with what you're doing, I think it's just really phenomenal.
I appreciate that. We want to see job creation happen, and understanding that this is a long game. Look at, especially within political economy and macroeconomics. I mean, a lot of these infrastructure plans, and the continent of Africa is a really, really good case study. When you look at, especially what the Chinese have been doing, when they come in and they're not looking about what's going to happen in 20, 30 years. They're not looking 5 years. Sometimes they're looking 50 years. They're looking 100 years. What's happening that's going to sustain their grandchildren, right? That's generational wealth, right? So when we're so busy thinking about how we're going to pay rent from 1 month to the next, we're not thinking about how are we forecasting for what our children are going to encounter. What type of education are we giving them? I see the school system. I mean, that was the thing that hurt me more than anything during COVID, was seeing so many of our kids that still right now are slipping through the cracks because of the education that they're receiving is not up to par. It's also not teaching them logic. It's not teaching them critical thinking. It's not teaching them the things. It's just a regurgitation of information. Google it, right?
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
find the answer. Like, I mean, we had to look through encyclopedia. My father used to make us write out of the dictionary. And I'm like, and
Well, you already told your age, but remember the biggest encyclopedias that used to come and used to
the
be like
whole,
the whole entire
Listen,
set.
the whole
Listen,
thing.
and listen, I homeschool now, and we don't have. My mother had a set of encyclopedias as well, and we would make us go look up whatever we wanted to know. So I don't have that now, but I sure, certainly when my kids ask me, "Hey, Dad, what does this word mean?" You see that dictionary over there?
Mhm.
Show them how to search through it, and
But
we have to get back to those type of things. Yeah.
and even just that, this is a tool. Use the
yeah,
tool
yeah,
appropriately, right? I mean, you
right.
have this master computer, but if we don't teach them the logic and reasoning and deductive reasoning, understanding, how to, that's one thing that I've always been grateful. I credit my Islamic background to, because Islamic scholars have always championed the logic and reasoning education as being able to dissect and understand, and then the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding how that works 360. Because the
Yeah,
last thing that you want is somebody that went, and I see this happening a lot in Clubhouse. As amazing as Clubhouse is, I also see this on Clubhouse. I can go to the library or I can Google how to perform open heart surgery. So now I know, okay? But do you want me performing open heart surgery just because I'm able to regurgitate everything that I read out of that book? If I don't understand it, right, I need the wisdom. I need the wisdom of the application. I need the wisdom of studying up under someone and being mentored and going through apprenticeship and understanding, true
yeah,
understanding. And then the
yeah.
wisdom is the application of it. So we
Sure.
must understand that these things do work 360. It's extremely critical that we are teaching our children that there is components of what it means to master a concept, right? It's not as simple as just like, well, I can Google it, right? I mean, there's an irreverence, I think, for education, and we've got to restore a reverence for knowledge, and we've got to restore a reverence for experts. And you want to give your kids things to strive for. I mean, their faces light up, and my face lights up when my children are able to talk to me about things that I had never even fathomed. And so we have to be impactful. We have to really recognize that our actions affect our community. I do not care how many times people feel like they operate in a silo. You do not, because what you
Yeah,
produce in your lifetime is going to directly impact, either positively or negatively, your sphere of influence in some way, shape, or form, right?
yeah,
And I've
yeah,
learned a lot of that through just taking the time to listen, and silence is such a powerful thing, so
yeah.
it's
So let
it's
me
really, really empowering.
Yeah, and you but listen, y'all see why I have Howard on, because the sister is not only is she deep and then her voice is entrancing because all you want to do is just listen. I
Right,
didn't hear
right.
that before. But the thoughtfulness of and the
Yeah.
passion, the sincerity of what you're saying, it is so obvious. It comes across so it comes across when we don't even see your face. So being able to see your face and make that connection is such a privilege. And I want to go back and I want to start looking at and peeling the onion back a little bit, because one of the key areas in with Cannanomics in color is looking at workforce development and being able to take data points and understanding BIPOC communities and being able to regurgitate or train or get these multi-state operators on board in a serious, intentional manner to make sure that workforce development is a priority. However, their ability to bring us into the workforce opportunities and not at just the entry level, and understanding that there's a wide variety of experiences that we can bring to the table. You have created a service to help them see and understand. And if you could just share kind of your thought and vision behind that, and if you've had any, operators who you've tapped into or that you've worked with to help them understand how your data can help them make some really good decisions.
Absolutely. So the workforce development piece is it's two part, right? So I want to give a huge shout out to Jennifer Excel at Leaf 411. She's an example of really strong allyship that I've seen, and working with what they're trying to forward as, nurses and cannabis nurses. And that is a particular sector of industry. And we understand that, in the Black community, especially, I mean, the legacy of nursing, I mean, it's such a strong impactful component of that, right? And knowing that the trust level that is there, right? The trust within the medical community. I mean, we've always had an aversion to these institutions and to these medications. And so, having an organization like E411, working with them to really understand, what are they seeking to accomplish and what are they seeking to bring to the masses so that they can better support. I mean, they do phenomenal work as a call-in, as a hotline. If you have a medical question or around or a strain or something, they've got their cannabis nurses are sitting there waiting to take that call. And that's a program that Jennifer, she said, admittedly, I'm not seeing the diversity that I would like to see. They've had partnerships and they're working with Color, which is a phenomenal organization as well. And so there's a lot of allyship that is going on. But having those conversations, the reason I say that it's twofold is because, so using that as an example, we have to understand, okay, what is Leaf 411? What are they trying to do? So, this is a hotline and this is, and it's also a medical service that can be woven into dispensaries and building those relationships as far as behind that kind of compliance piece of having medical advisors that are, there and ready to go to serve those compliance pieces depending on the market and the expectation. So we know that that's going to be a component of the workforce that as more insurance companies open up to the idea of cannabis as medicine, as we we're seeing different transitions happen from the political sphere, because I know there's been a lot of barriers to entry there. While they're working there, we have to also be working on the other side and understanding what are the barriers to entry in skills training for a lot of these nurses. I mean, some of these medical courses and programs are at price points that, quite frankly, your average nurse in a socioeconomic area that is maybe lower to middle income is not necessarily going to be able to afford. And it's hard to get grants and it's hard to get scholarships in place for something like that, right? But we need more people trained in our communities because there's the stigma that's there. There's the trauma. The older Black community is like, they're still kind of caught up in a lot of the propaganda that was fed to them, so they need people that they can trust. So when we look at workforce development, we have to look at what is the specificity of the project and then what is the specific need of the community, right? And
Right.
how do we create programs and a pipeline? Because we know that there's X amount of nurses that are available within this particular community that can serve this particular community, right? And then you can start to look at what is the forecasting, right? What is the cost? And you start doing those cost matrices and looking at where you can create a sustainability program so that the revenue matches the expectation of that workforce development. And that can start to bring those communities back up to par. So that's one way that you're able to use data, but you can't just use data that is through this automated, because there's a huge drive of like automation data and just like, which is great because it's efficient. It is very efficient. But Roz, you touched on something very critical. A lot of times we feel like they're not actually asking us. And I'll be
Right.
honest with you, a lot of, the my elders, they're not going to take an online survey about their needs, right? So you need to almost sit down and it's a way to create intergenerational dialogue as well. Because if you have a young Black HBCU student that is going around and sitting and collecting data in a very personal way, right? And
Right.
striking those conversations, it can seem time consuming. But what I will say is that you're going to get a palette of data. You're going to get a really, really strong source that you can look at and you can aggregate kind of across different diverse communities and see what are the trends and find the intersections. So as much as we need to use software and data tools, and I really want to work closely with the technology community to be able to see what can we identify there, because that's not my wheelhouse, right? But what I do know is that the collection of traditional data as it pertains to economic forecasting requires communities to trust you
Yeah.
and building that trust.
And you can't build that trust without being in the community. I'm telling you, it is not so unique to our communities, but it is absolutely a part of the very fabric of who we are. If you are
Yeah.
unwilling to come into our communities, you are always going to struggle to get that data and participation and feedback, because of a level of distrust, as well as because I think in many regards, communities of color have felt marginalized and left out of the conversation for so long, we don't seek out these type of opportunities to, have our voices heard and our numbers counted, so that it can impact, larger scales of economy, if you will. So,
Absolutely.
we certainly have to go into the communities. I like what you said. If you are a company who are looking to connect with the communities of color, yeah, it may take someone that you send into that community a little bit longer, but the richness of the data that they come out with, I think is second to none, because Black folks, we want to share our stories. Like we want to give you guys this information, but it has to be done in a way that we feel like our culture and our identities are going to be respected and not misused and misappropriated. Because I think, even we
Exactly.
talk about right now the vaccination and the way that our community is just kind of feeling towards it, that is built on historical experiences in this system. And so the way to break that down is to actually go in there.
So that ain't just by just osmosis that we feel a certain way that
Right.
we feel about. No, this is from
It's
historical background.
Thank you, Roz. Speak on
Exactly.
that.
And I think one of the key things that I'd like to transition and kind of pivot our conversation towards is the fact that you guys, everyone that's on here, if you're listening, you have some type of connection or interest in the hemp and the cannabis industry. We know that we're operating in an industry that is not federally legal. Once federal legalization really hits, and we're looking at the long game. So I truly tell people, look at the long game in this industry, in the opportunities, because it's not what's going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years. It's what's going to happen in the next 5, 15, 20, 25, 50 years down the road. And I will tell you this, in any new industry, no matter where it is, it's consumer driven. And we will tell you, and this is, I want to, man, it's so much, Howard, because your Instagram page, I got to put that up. The one is Queen is, what's the Instagram page again?
So Queens Inspired Kings is our, the work that we do with women. So it is focused on, absolutely.
It's so powerful, because if the data that you've collected, I done checked it out, girlfriend, and the data that's collected there, all you got to do is see historically what has been happening in a consumer-driven type of industry. Cannabis is going to be a consumer-driven industry, meaning consumers are going to be able to demand what they want and what they're willing to pay for. And these companies who are now on the high are going to level out, because you're going to open up more competition, but consumers are going to drive. They're going to drive what products come out, who they're going to buy from. If we want to fight for social equity, if your inside of your business doesn't reflect the community, consumers are going to be the ones that make decisions as to where they spend their money. Can you talk about just data collection from a consumer perspective, how important that is, the work that you do, and how companies should now be thinking about that, even though they're like, now it really doesn't make a difference, because it's like, it's only one of me in Virginia, let's say, in one area. So basically you either buy from me or you won't be able to buy, but that's going to change.
Well, I think that sometimes these retailers, and this is something that I can speak on from my experience in Canada, because where Canada kind of discounted what was happening, the fact that, there's still a legacy market, even when you go to legalization. So even if you don't see a legal market of supply and demand going on, just know that those figures still matter, right? Because, if I'm now in a legal market and all I have to do is go to a dispensary and I can buy packaging and I can go see my legacy, there's people that this happened frequently. They saw this in Canada quite a bit, right? So where people were still, it was just like, now they felt safer to go and deal with whoever they were dealing with in the legacy market. So now, where I think that it's important for us to understand is that the power of this plant, and that's why I have to give Ika her flowers all the time, because her showing and teaching me, as well as really recognizing all of the different components that come into what this plant can do, and the different strains and the different possibilities, and what, the difference between CBD. I mean, there's so many complexities in the medical research field, right, in and of itself. And that's a key component, I think, for the consumer forecasting that you're doing, is why are people buying from you? What does your product do? Or is it just weed in a pretty bag? Because that's a huge, that's a big question, right? Like, if you are in an area that has a very powerful sports culture, right? Your offering might want to be tailored around what are the expectations of athletes in that area, or what is the expectation of that particular sector that you're servicing. I mean, if you've got a community where you see mental health is been a huge issue, or you're dealing, we're battling these opioid crises, and we're battling these different kind of addictions and alcoholism and things that are going on. I mean, the trends that are happening with the communities that you're in is going to also show you what is the product, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we talk about in economics is elasticity of demand. We talk about insulin as being a good case study for that, because you need insulin to live, right? So no matter what the price of insulin is, they will charge, and people are going to pay because they need it to survive, right?
Sure.
So how much someone needs to utilize your product is going to also inform consumer decisions, right? So really understanding the need of the consumer market and what the desire, the expectation, and are you doing the proper educational marketing? Because educational marketing is a big component of ancillary services that is needed, so that people understand the way to use your product. Because you remember when we used to have those infomercials, right? That would come on.
Yes.
You've got that type of, like, the mop that does 5,000 things, and the sham wows and the OxyCleans and all. They took the time, and this may seem silly to some people, but they're sitting there and they're telling you all of the amazing things that the product does. Because if you just kind of saw it sitting on a shelf and you don't know what it is, then why are you going to buy it, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
now
Yeah.
you've got all this like exciting like advertising, and oh my goodness, I just saw. I mean, it cleaned up everything and it saved me 50 hours on whatever whatever the emotional buy-in, because people will make consumer-based decisions based on three capacities, right? So you've got emotion, you got ego, and then you have pragmatism or logical decision making, right?
Okay.
So understanding what lens your consumer is looking at your product and your offering through is very critical. So when we look at the consumer data, the consumer data varies from place to place. I mean, this is a very niche type of sector right now. I mean, there's not kind of a blanket all across the industry. Like, you can pick up and move to somewhere like Oklahoma, or pick up and move to somewhere like Missouri. Some of these markets are opening, and there may be a lot of opportunity. I mean, we see it in our communities all the time. How many Black communities do you know there's a nail salon, that there's a Chinese restaurant, that there's, these are things that were brought over from people who decided to immigrate here. They brought whatever the type of food that they were eating, and they brought it into a community that didn't have it. And they do money hand over fist. They do
Yeah.
good business, because it's just something that it's true to who they are. So they bring that to a community that has a need or a desire or wants it, and then they see opportunity, see prosperity, and then they work through it. And part of the workforce development piece is knowing that we need the humility to learn, right? If you don't know how this
Yeah.
industry works, I mean, people want to come in and they want to be business owners. Eric, you were talking about the licensing, right? Like, everybody want to get a license, and the social equity around licensing. I mean, yeah, we need people that are in the Black and brown community to be able to access licensing. But if they don't know how to operate the business, or they don't have the support, we're setting them up for failure. And I feel like
Yes.
that's an egregious injustice.
Yes.
It is. It is.
That's
And
why.
and 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 I think is also and to some degree a part of the design, right? Like, if you say you gave us a bunch of licenses, now you can say, well, we did our part. But
Right.
in reality,
Mhm.
we haven't done anything to set people up for long-term sustainability and being able to manage their business. And so I mean, you're touching on, but you're bringing like that real economic, that real like
Data driven.
research and so
Yeah.
on to back what we've been saying for so long. Like, this has to be more about more than just giving licenses. And how are we educating people? One of the questions I have for you, that I've been sitting here and listening. I'm one of those people who, I love the medical marijuana segment. I love the adult use segment, but I'm all in on hemp. And I
Mhm.
believe that we didn't outlaw this plant because of something we could roll up and get high off of.
Mhm.
It's everything else. And when I think about just the economies that are going to come to bear, just from all of the, it's something like 25,000 known products from hemp prior to modern day technology. That to me is where the big play is. That's where I think our communities have a real opportunity to get, some real stake in this space and so on. So, what are you guys doing from that standpoint?
And shout out to just 1 second, a little plug. Shout out to all our hemp farmers out there. Hemp, all of our CBD retailers out there that got products. Natalie Bonner, Stanley Atkins, Louis Vega with Wepa Farms. Shout out my brother. I gotta give them some love because these are people that they're in it, and it's more folks. But the hemp opportunity is so strong. But go ahead, Howard, please.
Well, I love now. You just got me excited, Eric, because the farmers down in Metter, Georgia, and Fort Valley State is doing a lot that they're spearheading and championing a lot. The Agri-Unity organization that's there. I've been working with Agropreneurs, which is an up and coming non-for-profit that is really trying to equip these farmers with their farm plans, with understanding all of the paperwork and navigating all of that has to be done to prepare to access some of this funding that is available through the federal government, understanding what the USDA through those land acts. Navigating that is so critical, and having boots on the ground in that capacity is very important. And I really want folks to think about what this can do, right? There was all this talk about, manufacturing is never coming back to America. Well, sure, we can say that, but we can also look at this, right? So if now we have hemp farms and we have it in more remote communities and like you can look like in Anniston, Alabama, you can look at a Metter, Georgia, you can look, Anniston, Alabama is a really good example because they've got these old factories that are there that are just kind of sitting there. This is a community that is, where they are socioeconomically, the support that they need, right? But there's farmland that's so adjacent. You can do these direct pipelines and you can create these programs. And I think that there's a lot of Black hemp farmers that I've connected with, especially through Clubhouse, that are just doing phenomenal things. And they're working with some of these smaller HBCUs and some of these more remote or rural, urban adjacent areas. And that's part of this, right? It's not just about cannabis. We are strongly rooted in CBD and hemp and understanding what that is going to do. Because if we think about plastics, if we think about all of these different products that can be created and that can be produced. I had a conversation even about, what those hemp products can do, like with rope and different things like, clothing, textiles. But a lot of those, they need support and incubator programs. Like we currently have a program that we're going to be launching probably later in this year that is a collaborative with a sister from here in Atlanta that she has, she's worked in Black hair care for her entire career, and understanding the power of natural hair care products is, we look at hemp and the support that's there and creating these types of farm programs. So young sisters can come in and they have their business, and whether it's natural hair or braiding or whatever the case may be, and to be able to come in and develop their own products and work with farmers and to create that intergenerational conversation as well, right? Because the wisdom that our elders have available to us is so powerful, and we don't harness it in the way that we really need to.
We're about to lose it. Sorry to cut you off, but it's real. Our farmers are aging out and they're dying off, and they're leaving land that the kids don't want, the next generation don't want to really be involved in it. We are moving further and further away from our birthright. And you mentioned it earlier, this is our birthright. And we have to find new pipelines and new ways to get us back into this. And I wholeheartedly believe hemp is that way. I have a new mentee that I'm mentoring. He's listening in right now. His mother and godfather brought him to me because he wants to get into this space. And so I'm having him understand this because I believe if I can inspire him to, get back to the farm through hemp, once you get there, other things are going to be there. Now you're going to think about, well, can I grow my own food? Can I grow, what else can we start to look at things a little bit differently. And I think that is so super, super important because we are literally, we're about to lose this great wealth of knowledge because many of us are just not taking the time to go and like you said, sit at the feet of our elders and listen and learn.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
look at the interesting cross-cultural crossover here, right? And why this resonates with me so strongly, right? You know, my father is Nubian. What a lot of people do not understand about what happened with the Nubian community in the south part of Egypt and the north part of Sudan, especially within South Egypt, when they made way for the high dam and the flooding of those communities, right, and losing those homes and losing that birthright, and a lot of that being taken away, and still fighting to really be categorized as an ethnic group within Egypt, and all of these other things that are going on there. You know, the loss. I mean, but the resiliency of that community, I mean, is a powerful thing, right? But there's a crossover there, and the reason I say that there's a crossover is understanding that these agricultural legacies, they extend and they run so deep. And when I have these conversations with farmers, I recognize that there's a wisdom that we are losing because we want microwave, we want all of it. So because I don't want to take the time, I'm okay with putting trash into my body. I'm okay with when I changed, and I credit that, and because the psychedelic market is also something that I really strongly advocate for people to pay attention to as well, because I have seen the impact on the healing of trauma, working with CPTSD survivors. Most of the work that we do with Queens Inspired Kings is from sexual violence and domestic violence survivors. Even my first husband, you know, we went through a very traumatic. I mean, when I say the domestic violence that took place in that first marriage, for us to be here now in this place of healing and forgiveness and co-parenting, and the way that we interact with information, right? The way that we interact with our feelings, and with, you know, and working through and taking accountability, taking responsibility for our actions. We know that there's been atrocities that have been done to us. We know that there are all kinds of systemic issues that are not going to be dismantled overnight, right? And even looking at what happened in a lot of these revolutions, post-colonialism, and looking on the continent and looking at the Arab Spring, I mean, you have to have an action plan afterwards, or if not, then the same problems is just going to reemerge, right?
Yes.
So,
Facts.
you know, economics and behavioral psychology is very closely tied
Yeah. No.
together. And that
And my
farming
undergrad
legacy is
degree is
going
in
to be everything.
psychology. So like everything you're saying, it really is resonating with me as well. Because you're right. We're not only living with historical traumas, but we're living through current and new traumas as well. And we, you know, these plants are so vital to our healing and us recognizing our connection to everything else that is around us. And I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm so excited. One of our board members, Dustin Robinson, is also, you know, Mr. Psychedelic Law, and I am on his team as well. We just submitted a bill here in the state of Florida to, you know, decriminalize psilocybin and psychedelics. Now, we don't anticipate it'll go anywhere, but it's a conversation starter. Get us to start thinking about this. And, you know, our communities, we have to be a part of these conversations, because these are the very things that can heal us and allow us to recognize our own agency in rebuilding our communities. Because, you know, I think after Katrina, you know, we learned, BET did a segment called Saving Ourselves, right? Ain't nobody coming to save us, y'all. Like we either gotta step up to the plate, or you know. So.
Well, I mean, or even being able to normalize the conversation about cannabis. Even that has gone from, we started M4MM in 2016, and what we've seen from 2016 to now 2021 has been extraordinary in regards to normalizing the conversation. Even being able to put a post up where people feel comfortable of clicking on it and liking it. When I first started, I couldn't pay someone to say I like it or give a comment, and now there has been a normalization of what we're talking about, and I think the same thing is happening. So I just bought my first book to understand about psychedelics, and how with the proper guidance and mental health, and how the approach to mental health. So I'm reading that to get myself up to speed, because I don't know about it. And so also a big shout out to CanX Jamaica. They're doing a conference in May on psychedelics with Doug Gordon, who's on our
another
board.
One of our board members. Yep,
absolutely. Amazing. So he's really taking it from just talking about it, kind of like, hey, to actually having more conversation or what have you.
It's projected, just so you know, real quick.
Yes.
It's projected that this is going to be a $3 trillion industry by like 2030 something, right? So, the projections around that, and then integrating that transpersonal psychology and that cultural experience, and being guided with shamans and with connecting to these indigenous cultures and respecting and honoring that, and not commoditizing it, and not to the point where it just completely loses its sacred value, right? These are important conversations. So I'm always grateful to be in a room with people who know more than I do, so that I can understand how we integrate that better into what we're doing.
Yeah, I just got connected to a group out in, I think they're in Detroit, and they're a group of Black individuals who are really weighing in on, and what they've been trying to do is connect the conversation around psychedelics to the African culture, and and how this has been, again, historically a part of who we are.
Is that through Brother Kalinde's people, I believe?
Say again?
Maybe Brother Kalinde's people, like Kalinde Network. I know that there's some.
I think that's the name of the
there's
group.
some strong. Big shout out to Brother Oyi that's here. He's local to us, and he's been really advocating and doing a lot in that vein. I mean, yes, these conversations are critical, and the support and moving and recognizing that, and also remembrance. We need to remember who we are, remember where we came from. And a lot of economic forecasting is being able to really understand, what happened already and where we're trying to go, right?
Absolutely.
How do we propel that?
Absolutely. Listen, guys, we're almost at our time period. What I want to do is I want to make sure we reset. I feel like I'm in Clubhouse, so reset the room for a second. So again, we have Haze AlFayed on with us today. This sister is powerful. She's brilliant. She's beautiful. She's educated. She's passionate. She's thinking outside the box in her approach to this industry, but she's staying within her wheelhouse. What she knows what she knows. And so I really challenge, if you are a part of an MSO, multi-state operator, if you're in the cannabis industry, if you are looking to maybe tap into Cannanomics in color, to understand how they can provide a service for you to be able to understand, from diversity, equity, and inclusion training to workforce development, when it comes to economic development, when you talk about community impact, you need to go to Cannanomics in color, and they can help you to understand how do you make a real impact. Don't call talking about, oh, we want to, we're going to put this on our application. If you put it on your application and don't deliver on it, we're going to have a problem with it. So I just want to make sure I thank you so much for being on with us. One final word that you want to leave with everybody, and then Eric, you can wrap us up, man.
Well, I'm very grateful to you, Roz. I mean, what you've managed to do. I've met a few people. Big shout out to Stanley here in Georgia. I mean, every time I come across someone who is associated with your organization, or what you've built is powerful. It's critical. It's important. And I just the final word is just really diversity of thought. I think that we touched on that, but understanding who you are, understanding your strengths, understanding that being wrong does not contribute to your self-worth, and that it is perfectly fine for you to really focus on your strengths and to really grow and to hone that. And as we move through this industry, holding people accountable starts with holding yourself accountable. Do you do business with integrity? Do you create a structure and a format that allows for the system to operate effectively without emotion, right? Sometimes we find ourselves making emotion-based decisions in business, and we're not relying on the data. And I really encourage people to understand that it's a hybrid. It's not one or the other. You have to sit down and have these real conversations and build trust and relationships. People do business with those that they trust and respect, but then also let the data tell a story. So learn how to marry those two. And if you don't know how to do that, we do workshops and make all of this digestible. So you can always contact me for that. So thank you.
I like that. Accessible and digestible. It's not enough just to have have access to the information. It's got to be something we can digest, right?
Exactly.
Haze drives a couple of different. If you're on Clubhouse, make sure you go follow her. She drives a couple of different rooms. She always sets the room off right, making sure, and also being able to give that levity of just of how we process the information that we're hearing, because all information is not meant for you. Figure out figure out your lane, stay in your lane. Also take what you hear, but also do your own research. Don't just digest, swallow, and accept as gold. Do your own research. do the due diligence, take some time. You have no excuse. Google is I'm like Simone. If you got Google and God, you got everything. And that came from Simone Kaysen. So shout out to Simone Kaysen. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Howard. We are going to definitely work together. You are in my sister circle. I need to be able to lean in on sisters that can give me strength when I'm going through my little ups and downs and trying to figure it out. So thank you so much for being on with us today. And Eric, man, close us out.
Man, this was fire.
Fire.
Oh my gosh. This was just an amazing conversation. And I mean, we still, this is the last week in January, y'all. We still in the first month of the year.
Yeah.
And we've been bringing y'all heat every single week. And so, listen, I just want to thank all of the people who have been listening, people who are engaging in the conversation. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we go on places and people just kind of sitting in the room listening, but you guys actually get engaged with us. You share, you give us kudos, and that support means the world to us. So thank you guys for joining, to our amazing guests. Thank you, sister, for just, sharing your light with the world. Continue doing that. And we as an organization want to continue to be there and support you on that. As usual, everybody, my message to y'all, go home this weekend, love on yourself, love on your family, get some rest, because come Monday morning, we got more work to do, and we're going to be right here again next week at Canna Talk with Roz. And just thank y'all for always tuning in. We'll see y'all next week.
Hey, thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Iowa. Next week, brother.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Bye.